Hello. Thanks for being with us. Today, I'd like to talk about learning obedience. The obedience I'm talking about is learning to obey God. Now, your first reaction is probably that obeying God is just one basic thing that all Christians have to do. And in a sense, you're right. But what I'd like to do today is to get down a little deeper and get to the understanding of just how obedience plays a role in God's plan for this earth and for you and I. But let's go back and start at the beginning in Genesis. We know, as all Christians know, that in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were told not to eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Of course, Eve ate the fruit and thereby committed the first sin. Now, let's take a close look and see what actually happened. In Genesis chapter 3, we read that the serpent came to tempt Eve, tempting her to eat the fruit that was forbidden. In verses 2 and 3, it specifically explains that Eve was aware of God's command not to eat the fruit. For she told the serpent that God had said they were not to eat the fruit of that tree because they would die. Now, we know that the lie Satan used was to tell Eve that if she ate the fruit, she would not die. And essentially, in other words, God was not telling the truth. Now, as I said, we know the story. Eve ate of the forbidden fruit, but she only did this after she looked at it and pondered the situation. And this is what I want you to zero in on today. Pay particular attention to what Eve did prior to actually eating the fruit. The Bible says that she saw that the tree had fruit that was good to eat, and also noticed that the fruit was pleasant to look at, and thirdly, she perceived that according to the serpent's words, eating the fruit would make her wise. Now, as I said, pay particular attention. What Eve was actually doing was reasoning in her own mind whether or not she should eat the fruit. Now, she had already explained to the serpent that God had said they were not to eat the fruit. And yet, she still reasoned in her own mind whether she should eat the fruit or not. What she actually did was to question God's authority, comparing God's commandment with the word of the serpent. She was making a judgment, and because she perceived that the fruit was good to eat, pleasant to see, and a fruit to make a person wise, she began to make a determination whether or not to obey God's command. Okay, think about this. Instead of just accepting God's leadership as the complete and final authority, she questioned it. Now, we know as Christians that God is perfect. We know that God never makes mistakes, and that whenever He gives us direction, He knows it's the best thing for us. In other words, it would seem to be a silly thing to question God. But that's exactly what Eve did. She questioned in her own mind whether what God had told her was true or not. She questioned God's judgment. She questioned whether God's direction to her and Adam was really the proper intelligent thing to do. Now, you may not think this is such a big deal. As humans, we do it all the time. We question authority all the time. Whether it's our supervisor, whether it's our governor, whether it's our husbands or parents, or whether it's other leaders in whatever situation we find ourselves, it is the natural state of man, woman, and child to second-guess authority. It is our natural response as human beings to react to authority by questioning the ability of those in leadership to make decisions properly. We especially recognize this quality of second-guessing authority in children, who always question their parents whenever a decision is made that the child does not care for. Everyone is aware of seeing and hearing children who are what we call headstrong. A headstrong child can sometimes be a holy terror. They are the worst kind of children for a babysitter or a Sunday school teacher, or even for the parents themselves. However, children are not the only ones who are headstrong. Adults are usually headstrong also, in that they try to resist authority almost at every turn.